Welcome. Okay, we are live. I am Graham Coffey. This is John Smith, also known as John Tweet Sports, the famous or infamous John Tweet Sports, depending on which side you're on in the battle of collegiate football.
Mostly the latter these days.
Yeah, right. Well,
yeah,
hey,
that's okay.
There's still some engagement that happens that way too, right? This is Dawgs Central Radio, Dawgs Central TV, just Dawgs Central, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if we've really nailed down a good name for it yet. If you weren't around on the internet yesterday, we just launched a new website that we're super excited about. John, myself, the My God Podcast guys, 100 Sanford, Dog Stats, Field Street Forum with some incredible recruiting coverage. The guys at Field Street Forum dropped a really juicy piece of Arch Manning intel earlier this morning that you guys can go and check out. But John, welcome. This is kind of the first of many shows that I think we'll be doing together here moving forward.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think you and I we've talked for a few months about just this idea of bringing a good community together, making good content, leveraging a lot of different skills that I think we have in the community, from analysis, from intel, from a lot of different places. And I'm really pumped. We already have a good, vibrant community after day one. A lot of good posters on the site, a lot of good folks contributing. And so thanks for everybody that's joined so far, and excited for the rest of y'all to get on board pretty soon.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've got what's the number of people lurking around already? Like 24 hours into this, we've got
24 hours. We're pushing 100 people total. So it's
awesome.
It's been a really good response from folks right out of the gate. So excited to have everybody.
For sure. Yeah, guys, go to dawgcentral.com, check it out. You can subscribe for 6 months for $33.18. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But we won't make this a long advertisement. Let's talk a little college football. So we got a lot going on right now. This is kind of the dead of college football season, but there's still things happening. Some official visitors on campus this weekend. Some freshmen reporting for UGA. Let's talk a little bit about these guys reporting first and foremost. So the kind of last half of Georgia's 2022 recruiting class is coming in. You've got Christian Miller, Dylan Bell, Andrew Paul, the late ad running back out of Texas, 5-star defensive back Julian Humphrey, Marvin Jones Jr., another 5-star who's an edge rusher, wide receiver Cole Spear, guard Drew Bobo, cornerback Jaheim Singletary, linebacker EJ Lightsey, who I think we're all really excited just to see healthy and moving after he was involved in was shot back in the spring. So, or I'm sorry, in the fall, winter, whenever it was, but looks healthy. Darius Smith, the kind of late rising edge defender in this class, out of South Georgia. Branson Robinson, #1 running back in the country. And then defensive back Marcus Washington, who just reclassified from the 2023 class earlier this month, but really exciting prospect. So of those guys, what do you think, is there anyone there that stands out, first of all? But second of all, we know the challenges that come with not sort of being in that early enrollee group. But is there anywhere that you see kind of just Georgia having a position of need, or feel like this guy's just so talented they're going to have to find a way to get him on the field?
Well, as you and I were talking, before we jumped on the show, I mean, they're a group of dudes that showed up this week in Athens. I mean, these are not, coaches these days. I think we as Georgia fans have gotten a little bit spoiled with early enrollees. So typically you have these guys who are super talented guys, and the majority of them are going to be early enrollees. But this time, I mean, there was a plethora of high 4-star rated guys that are super talented, guys that I feel like are flying under the radar, that showed up this week. And so I'm excited. I think for me, I'm really excited about the defensive guys that have showed up. Julian Humphrey is one guy that I'm really pumped to hear more information about what he does in camps. I think Darius Smith is an underrated guy. I think he's a guy that that will develop. I mean, he's 6'6", he's 225. I think he's a guy that not a lot of folks have talked about on the edge, and I think he's somebody that I'm excited to see. What happens. Obviously, Branson Robinson. I mean, we have all the Nick Chubb comparisons. I mean, that kid. I have been around some grown men, and I look at that guy. Like, that is a grown man that walked into that room. And so I would say, those three guys in particular, for me, I'm really excited to see them to start getting reps as camp starts up for them, just to see their faces and personalities, as the summer goes on and how they can develop over the summer.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we know, like we, both kind of alluded to, like it is hard coming into the summertime now in modern college football. You're kind of behind the 8 ball, which is a little bit wild to think about because it was only a decade ago where you may have just a small handful of early enrollees in a recruiting class. And more often than not, it was like your young quarterback that may have a chance to play early. Like there was, we all remember Aaron Murray and Zach Mettenberger dueling it out at G-Day once upon a time. But yeah, you look at these guys and I think one thing that Kirby Smart and that staff have been really good about is just kind of, Kirby's installed this defense so many times that I think has a really good feel on, and Muschamp and Schumann and all these guys as well. Like they have a very good feel on what's going to be hard to grasp and what is going to be a little bit easier to pick up. And, usually what's easy to pick up is just, hey, go get the quarterback. Right. So I think like a guy like Darius Smith could be in that position to be kind of like a Adam Anderson when he was a freshman. Georgia just on third down packages, they kind of put him on the edge and they just said, go and get the quarterback or spot the quarterback. And maybe that's an area where we see him.
Yeah, he's long and fast. And I think, the reason I mentioned defenders is I think most folks know that tune in to college football. The offensive side of the ball, it's really tough to get playing time early because of how complex things are, right? Like you got to know formations, you got to know your positions, you got to know audibles, you got to know, kind of reading defenses in a lot of ways. And so I think it can be difficult on that side of the ball to get playing time early unless you're just a guy like Brock Bowers, right? Unless you're just an absolute, stud that shows up. And that typically means an early enrollee. The defense side of the ball, you mentioned it. Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Glenn Schumann, those guys can create packages where you don't have to do that much. It's still going to be complex, but if you're talking about an edge rusher or if you're talking about a defensive lineman, it really, you have to know 2 or 3 things, and then you just be an athlete and play on that side of the ball. And so I think for me, that's why I always kind of gravitate toward later enrollees on the defensive side, because I think those guys have a better chance of getting playing time. But man, it's you have to feel good about being a Georgia fan right now. If you look at that list of guys that just walked in the door, knowing the guys that were early enrollees and knowing the guys that are coming back from last year, this machine is not slowing down anytime soon.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, I feel like we would be remiss not to mention Branson Robinson and, looking just kind of historically, no, he's not an early enrollee. And yes, it is often hard for young running backs to pick up, particularly pass protection schemes. But like, I think you're going to see Georgia with big leads in a lot of games this year. Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton, I think, are going to be pretty much the clear 1-2 going into camp. But in the SEC, you need 4 or 5 running backs. We saw it happen to Alabama last year, right? Like, and Dajan Edwards, we know, is sort of that third guy right now. But I just think Branson is, going to be hard to keep off the field in some of those fourth quarters when Georgia maybe has a big lead and they're trying to run the clock out. And depending on what he does with those carries, I mean, it was the late in that Clemson game, the opener in 2014, was it? Or maybe 2013?
Yep.
I think 2013, when we saw Nick Chubb for the first time. So it's just if you get on the field and you do something eye-popping, then there's a chance you stay on the field. So I'm very fascinated to watch what happens with him, just because our buddy Trey just went down and into Mississippi and filmed him for a little hype video type thing, and came back and was just like, I've never seen a guy with a body that looks more NFL ready at the age of 18.
I mean, it's easy to see, and when you see enough players at 18 years old, it's obvious when a guy just pops off the screen, and Branson definitely does that. And I think you're right. I think Nick Chubb is a great comparison for a lot of reasons, but I think, if you look back at that Clemson game, late in the game, Georgia's up, a couple touchdowns, and Nick Chubb starts getting the ball, and you see what happens. And in that game, Mark Richt and company, they were just running toss sweeps, right? Like they were just running, they weren't doing anything complicated, but that's what when you have a guy that's that physically gifted, if you can get to a place where you have a defense worn down, you can get him some playing time, and that can really accelerate the growth. We know that, the challenge, right, for these guys coming in, not just learning all the things, but then you got to go out there in front of 93,000 people. That's going to be by far the biggest crowd that any of these kids have ever played in front of. And so if you can get them in the games early, and I think Georgia's going to have a good opportunity to do that this year. If you can get them in the games early, when you get in those later games, whether if it's God forbid injury related, or if it's just, you need a wrecking ball later in the game, a third or fourth rotation in there to just wear a defense down on a Kirby death march. It's good to have guys that have been in there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I think, one thing we've come to know about Todd Monken is just like, he's been, in bowl press conferences last year, he was like, it's always a priority to get out healthy with a win. And he's a guy that has a very deep playbook. We waited till the Orange Bowl to see halfback passes and, hiding Brock Bowers as a left tackle and all sorts of that stuff. Yeah. So it's like, he's not going to burn the match until he needs to burn the match. And so all the more reason why I think you'll just see a lot of vanilla play calling, especially if that defense looks good early in the year against Oregon and a couple opponents the first few weeks. Like if they feel like, okay, we get a couple touchdown lead or we get a 17-point lead and this game is over, then be ready to see a guy like Branson Robinson. And maybe, who knows, Andrew Paul as well. A guy that was a late riser in the class, but just running backs get nicked up. And you need running backs in practice to do everything. They get a little ankle tweak or whatever, and all of a sudden, you got guys that could play if you needed them to, but maybe you don't need them to, and you got a guy like Andrew Paul out there, and he's having a big day. So definitely something to watch there.
Yeah, the first 5 games of the year, right, are Oregon, Samford, South Carolina, Kent State, and Missouri. So you're going to have
not exactly a murderer's row.
Yes, it may not be Oregon. Who knows? We'll see how that goes. First game of the year. But I think if you look at those next 4 games between Samford, South Carolina, Kent State, and Missouri, I think you're going to have opportunity to get guys in the game if you need to.
Don't sleep on the golden flashes. Just kidding. I think lastly before we move on.
Yeah.
You brought up all the reasons why defense is kind of the area where some of these late enrollees have a better chance of getting on the field. But you go back and watch G-Day. It's very clear Georgia has a number 1 cornerback in Keely Ringo. And I think it's very unclear exactly what the pecking order looks like at boundary corner past that. You hope Tyke Smith is healthy and kind of comes back into that slot defender spot. William Poole did a great job in that role in the national championship game. So I think you've got some guys there, and maybe you have some guys that can kind of switch over and play safety opposite of Chris Smith, depending on how all the cards sort of fall. But I Julian Humphrey and Jaheim Singletary are two guys that are really, really impressive defensive backs and guys that, in All-American Bowl practices showed up with all the other best players in the country and looked dominant for stretches. And I think that's an area where, as a defensive back in Georgia's defense, you can kind of put this guy on the edge and say, hey, stay with the guy across from you and just do that. It's pretty easy to grasp that early on. So I think there is a chance that we'll see one of those young defensive backs, whether it's Humphrey or Singletary or Dalen Everett, who had some nice moments on G-Day. I think one of those guys is going to have to maybe step up and play at some point this year and play in some big moments. Yep. But athletically, I think they're in the spot. So let's move on a little bit and talk about what's going on this weekend on campus. Some pretty big official visitors. We've got CJ Allen, Raymond Cottrell, Caleb Downs, #1 safety in the country, 5-star. Yep. You got a big battle for him going there. Jalen Hale, Gabriel Harris, Justice Haynes, Dog Legacy. Lawson Lucky, also a Dog Legacy and a UGA commit, tight end. Chris Peel, who our guys at Field Street Forum feel like, he may be the next recruit to kind of pop in this 2023 class in terms of a commitment. TJ Shanahan, Pierce Sperlin, another tight end commit, and Raylan Wilson, and then of course Arch Manning. So what do you think about all this? I mean, we're kind of getting into the stretch of the next few weekends, lots of big names on campus. In this class, there's a lot of guys that are in the mix, but very few commits right now. So who do you have your eye on?
Well, I think Georgia has moved into that stratosphere the last few years of recruiting guys that it's going to be difficult to get commitments as early as maybe, I don't know. People look at it different ways. Either it's difficult to get commitments as early as you would want as a fan or maybe even a coaching staff, or the coaching staff are directing everything, and so commitments are going to fall when they're going to fall. People can read it different ways. I think I'm super interested. We can talk about Arch Manning in a second. I'm super interested to see Caleb Downs, what happens there. I mean, that is a big battle. I think Ohio State, Alabama in the mix. I like the energy with the tight ends, Pierce Sperlin and Lawson Lucky. I think those two guys, not only do they seem to be just in the mold of what Todd Hartley is building and has built at UGA with the guys that he's brought in, but I think Pierce in particular, but Lawson as well, seem to be guys that other people gravitate toward, right? So I'm excited to see kind of, those personalities and just what comes out. My favorite thing about these official visits is honestly to see who gets in the gear, who are in the pictures together, who are posted on the stories together, right? Like you start to piece together these cliques when you're weird like me and follow recruiting as closely as I do. And so I'm interested in the behind the scenes on the social media of seeing, which guys are kind of gravitating in groups together and kind of, what we can start gnawing on from there.
Yeah, right. And I mean, the hope for the staff when they get all these guys on campus together is that relationships, form, and those relationships turn into teammate relationships at the next level. I agree with you in the tight end room. Raymond Cottrell, wide receiver commit, it feels like he's been committed to Georgia for forever now. But I think that's another guy who is kind of, I always call it like the kind of wearing the Richard LeCount hat, just because he was sort of the first big name recruit for Kirby Smart at Georgia and was so instrumental and vocal in putting together his own recruiting class. And there's kind of a couple of those guys every year. Jelon Walker was sort of that guy for the 2022 class in a lot of ways. But I'm very interested in sort of how that plays out. You've also got Raylan Wilson from Michigan on campus. He's committed to Michigan.
Yeah, a Harbaugh commit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Totally.
Do you think? So let's. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Does Raylan Wilson flip or not?
This weekend or just by the end?
No, just by the end of the cycle. You can give us a low, medium, or high confidence. Obviously, we can't predict the future. But
I am going to say. I'm going to say yes, but I'm low confidence there.
Okay, low
but
confidence.
I think UGA has been pretty relentless in that recruitment, and so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, man, the other one that I really want to talk about is Caleb Dawgs, right? I mean, I know we alluded to him a moment ago, but like you're talking about, and I'm always hesitant to say this, but it's like he is a generational defensive back prospect. There's, like, and really, it feels like safety has been a spot where, like Kamari Wilson ends up at Florida last year. There's kind of been some, that's been one of the few places where Georgia's maybe had a little bit of hard luck on the recruiting trail in the last couple cycles. And it's tough because you just watched Lewis Seen go in the first round. Like Georgia's doing a lot with the safety prospects they have on campus in terms of showing like we can develop these guys into being NFL ready. But, for whatever reason, those battles haven't fallen their way. And so I'm very interested to know kind of where Caleb Dawgs is. Everybody feels like this is a Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama battle. It's also important to remember his brother is at UNC. Dre Bly is at UNC. There's a really strong relationship there. And, sometimes the kid just wants to go and be kind of the big fish in the small pond and maybe not have all of that pressure.
Yeah, he's also taken an official visit to Notre Dame next week, I think. And you have Kyle Hamilton like that just coming off the heels of Kyle Hamilton. Like I think it is a Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama battle. I think your point about UNC is valid. I think Notre Dame could potentially be in that mix too. But I agree with you. I'm always hesitant to say generational because what does that mean and those types of things. But if you watch this kid, I mean his instincts on the football field are just that's what you can't teach, right? Like you can't teach a guy to just to find the ball, to have the athleticism to get in position and to make the right decisions time after time, and he's just shown the ability to do that and at a high level even as a young kid in high school. And so I'm very interested to see where this lands. Georgia hasn't been able to reel in those high profile, kind of shiny star safety recruits, but you got Will Muschamp on staff now, and Will Muschamp, I don't put it past Will Muschamp when it comes to recruiting. I think that guy is very underrated by a lot of people when it comes to his ability to recruit, especially with the resources that he has at Georgia. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I also think that's going to be one of those where, like, Travis Hunter kind of got away from Georgia in-state last year, but he really wasn't an in-state kid. Like he wasn't Georgia grown in the way Caleb Dawgs is. He's from Florida. Everyone thought he was going to go back home to Florida. I think though that, what Georgia has to sell in terms of development with Muschamp and Kirby Smart together is pretty impressive, but it's just there's so many factors with NIL and all the stuff that's going on right now and sort of who the decision maker is and all of that. But I think that's going to be a fascinating recruitment to watch because I don't see it ending anytime soon. I think it's going to come down the wire probably all the way until December or maybe even February. Who knows? And I think everybody's going to want him bad. And even if he does commit somewhere before then, nobody's going to let up because he's too good. So it's just we'll keep an eye on it. This won't be the last time we talk about him. But if you haven't gone and watched his highlight tapes on YouTube or whatever, do it. It's a lot of fun. All right, so now's the part where we talk about Arch Manning being on campus. You already kind of alluded to the seeing prospects in gear, and that's not really something we've seen from Arch yet. So, I mean, that's an interesting one, right? Like, do we get a picture to leak out of him and, with the national championship trophy, or sitting in the dark in Sanford Stadium, looking all pensive and angry, and like some gray jersey we've never seen before, or, what's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen Arch Manning. I've seen him in the stands with a Georgia baseball cap on, and I saw him and his family. I saw a picture of them at the Mayflower downtown Athens,
Okay.
and so I think those are about the only recruiting photos that we've seen from Arch. So it's going to be interesting to see how much he embraces that side of recruiting. We know his family is pretty buttoned up in this process. They are a family that a lot of things that are important to a lot of recruits are not necessarily important to them. But we know that they've determined, hey, they want Arch to have a good college experience. They obviously come from a family where he's been around Super Bowl champions, Super Bowl trophies, NFL MVP trophies. I think, a lot of the flashy stuff doesn't mean as much, but I am interested. One of the things that I don't think we've seen, and I'm interested to see if what we get from this weekend is his actual personality, right? Like, I would love to see, does some of that come out in his visit? When you think about what we talked about, photos, when you think about, kind of just the way that Georgia does recruiting, kind of hype videos and things. I'm interested to see that piece. Also, I think behind the scenes, I think Kirby Smart, Todd Monken, and staff, including folks that are no longer on the Georgia staff that are helping with this recruitment.
I think it's okay to say Matt Luke is still.
Yeah, Matt Luke's still involved, right? And I think there are guys that have built long relationships with Arch and Cooper and his family. And I think that's going to be the focus this weekend, is continue to foster those relationships. I don't think I'm excited for Georgia to just let Arch be one of the guys among many guys on this visit, and see kind of how those relationships develop.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, I think there's probably kind of this like misconception from a lot of folks that like Arch Manning comes on campus and all these recruits are sort of treating him like the prom king or prom queen or whatever. But like the reality is, like, all these dudes are competitive. I mean, I talked to I won't name names, obviously, because this was off the record, but I talked to a defensive back recruit in an upcoming class. The last time Arch was on campus, he was there at the same time. And, we had a long conversation. And towards the end of it, I was like, well, did you interact with Arch? And he was like, nah, man, like, quarterbacks don't like me. I picked them off, like, and that's exactly what you want to hear from your young stud future potential defensive back. Right. But it's just like, I think, you kind of alluded earlier to Lawson Lucky, Pierce Spurlin, Raymond Cottrell. It's like you've got three potential future targets of his that are already, I think, solidly in this class. So maybe there's a little bonding that happens there. But I mean, I think his personality is maybe the best glimpse into his personality we've gotten is he created a Twitter account, followed nobody, and put high school student in his bio. But did go through the process of getting himself verified with a blue check mark, which I think is kind of interesting, right? But what I take away from that is like,
who's the business manager in the Manning family LLC that got Arch verified?
I don't know.
Anyway,
that's a good question. No, it's cool. But I mean, The Athletic did a really good article kind of going back on Peyton's recruitment and Eli's recruitment. And it was sort of like, want to recruit a Manning, this is how it works. And, back in those days, I mean, Peyton sort of, in a lot of ways, ushered in the early sort of edge of the modern recruiting era. But I mean, literally Archie Manning was sitting there fielding phone calls in their New Orleans living room, and any reporter in the country could come and hang out, take pictures, and all of that. And it's like, we got the glimpse of Cooper Manning with Thomas Davis filming a commercial somewhere, barking into the iPhone camera, and like everybody's like, oh, like what does that mean? But I think honestly, dude, like Arch Manning, personality wise, seems way more Eli and way less Peyton in terms
very much so.
I was in college a little bit after Eli Manning was, but I used to go to a lot of Ole Miss games. My high school girlfriend went to school there, and I'd go down there a lot. In the late 2000s, and Manning would come back a lot, and he would go out to the bars in Oxford a lot and enjoy himself, and that's fine, right? Like that's okay.
Yeah. Totally fine.
But I think Arch Manning in all of this, a lot of conversation of like, oh, he's Steve Sarkisian with innovative offenses, and this quarterback system and that quarterback system and that offense and this offense, and I think at the end of the day, like, this dude is probably, I think he knows, like, I'm going to be a professional football player for 10, 15, 20 years after I'm done. And I'll have plenty of time to be a professional later. I want to enjoy my college experience, and that's always been a priority. I mean, Peyton came back for a senior year when he could have easily been probably a number 1 or a top 5 pick. So I think when you look at that,
one nugget that Arch has mentioned, exactly what you're saying, along the lines of what you're saying. I've read a few interviews with him, and one thing that he's mentioned consistently when he talks about schools, he talks about the town. So he talks about Austin was a big city. He said it had it's a big city, kind of like New Orleans, where he goes to school. He mentioned Athens being the best college town that he's probably been to. He mentioned going back to Tuscaloosa and kind of just seeing more about what the town was all about. So he is talking about this like a guy looking for a college town, looking for a college experience, right? It's very different. And so if you go back and read his interviews, especially there was one that was published recently that maybe I'll tweet out, but he actually mentions not just Sarkisian and what is Sarkisian going to do this year, and now that he's had a year under his belt, but then he mentions Austin is very similar to New Orleans. It's like got a big city feel to it, and so that's one thing that is different that I think validates your point in terms of what he's looking for. That there is an experience there for sure.
100%. And I think, on top of that, it feels like this is one of those recruitments where every time something comes up with Arch, or at least every time I tweet out something about Arch, like a lot of Georgia people are like, he's going to Texas. I'm convinced he's going to Texas. And then I talk to people that are well plugged in Texas, people that I know. I spent years living in Texas, and have some good sources there that are well connected, and they're all like, we think he's going to Georgia. So it's one of those things where I don't know if it's I think there's maybe a lot of fans that just don't want to get too hopeful and be let down on this, but I think, and this is going to sound odd, but if you look at Texas's quarterback room with Quinn Ewers and sort of what they have there, and kind of what Georgia has after Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck, and I'm not trying to run anybody down or upset anybody, and people do develop and all of that. But it's like, I do think right now it's more important for Georgia to land Arch Manning than it is for Texas, just in terms of the future of their quarterback room. Program perception wise and all of that. Yes, Texas. But I think Carson Beck, you've seen him take, some consistent steps forward. But after him, I don't know if Georgia feels great about what they have. And that could change over the coming, off-season practices. It could change over the fall. You never know when the light's going to click on for somebody. But I think if Arch Manning doesn't show up in Athens, Georgia's probably looking at a portal quarterback next offseason, and has to be all in and really needs to find one. So it's going to be And I mean, I think Georgia also, it's kind of a ballsy move, for lack of a better term, the way they've played this, right? Because they haven't had another quarterback on campus in a year, at least not a 2023 quarterback. So it's clear to me they feel good about where they are with him, but Texas hasn't had another 2023 quarterback on campus in about that same time too. So
agree. I think they're both. I think that Georgia and Texas are both, want to be very clear around giving off the impression that this is Arch Manning's, not his job, because I don't think Steve Sarkisian or Kirby Smart would say he's an automatic starter. But they are giving the impression that we're not going to crowd the room with another, quarterback in the 2023 cycle, and they're going to be patient and let Arch make his decision. I tend to agree with you with your point of Georgia, potentially going the portal. I think, Texas, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I think you do have, a situation with Quinn Ewers, who by all accounts is, supposedly the guy.
He's
at
a
Texas,
stud.
but
He's a stud.
yeah, he's a stud, an absolute stud. And Georgia, to your point, not to diminish any of the guys in the Georgia quarterback room, but they don't have that, cachet of a guy that skips his senior year of high school to go to Ohio State. I mean, so I think there's things like that. But I will also say, I think both Sarkisian and Kirby Smart know that they can slow play this with Arch Manning, because they can both go out and get a portal QB if they need to. Your point, though, I think is very valid, that Georgia, it's more important for Georgia to land Arch because Georgia doesn't have, with all respect to the guys in the quarterback room, Georgia doesn't have a Quinn Ewers type guy that has that ceiling and that potential. And I think that just, part of that is just the way that Georgia has recruited quarterbacks. I think that's, a little bit different than the way Sark and Texas go at it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think the really interesting thing, and I'll say this and we can move on, but if you look at what Texas, sort of the dynamic, right? Because the same interview you were alluding to earlier, where he was talking about Athens being, the best college town he's been to and all of that. He also talked about, like, I want to see improvement from Texas in year two under Steve Sarkisian. But the problem a little bit is, like, if Texas improves in year two, let's say they go 9-3 or 10-2, if they do that, then Quinn Ewers is pretty much like planted himself as the a starter at Texas, and Manning's waiting at least a year, if not probably two, before he plays. So it almost hurts them at the same time it helps them. It's a really strange dynamic.
Yeah, I agree. I think if Texas does well this season, it's clearly because either Quinn Ewers, which is most likely, or a guy like Hudson Card potentially on the Texas roster. You have good quarterback play at Texas if they make that step forward. And I think that comment, the actual quote, I was trying to look it up here, but the actual quote was, it was Coach Sark's first year with a whole new roster that he hadn't recruited. It's definitely hard to go in and be successful. I'm looking forward to see what they can do this year. That's kind of my deciding factor there, a year under his belt, to see what he can do now. But it is a catch-22, because I don't think Texas goes 9-3 or 10-2. It takes a big step forward unless you have really, really good quarterback play. And I think the really, really good quarterback play is going to come from Quinn Ewers, who's a redshirt freshman transfer, or Hudson Card, who's a sophomore, guys that aren't going to be draft eligible next year. And so that's going to be an interesting dynamic.
It is, for sure. It definitely is. So cool. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Moving on before we wrap up, it seems like every day some more sort of college football odds come out for 2022, which is always exciting because it says we're getting closer. We're kind of getting into that 3-month to go window. But one thing that is interesting, DraftKings has got a ton of actual lines on games going all the way out to October and November, early lines. If you were watching this show this time last year, and you listen to me taking Georgia as a 7-point favorite against Florida in July, then you made a lot of money. But looking at over-under win totals, and I literally was just scrolling, and so sorry, this is off the cuff. I didn't prepare you for it. But Alabama's over-under 2022 regular season win total is 10.5 on DraftKings, which it's juiced very heavy to the over. It's minus 190. Over, and if you were to bet under 10.5, you get plus 155 in return for your dollars. So they definitely seem to think that it's going to be over, but it's interesting to me that it's not 11, it's not 11.5, it's 10.5. Any thoughts on that? Because they are also still the favorite for they have the lowest odds for winning the national title.
Yeah, I think those combined, Alabama is the 10.5, the over 10.5. I think for me is a safe pick, but I also think I'm not sleeping on the under for Alabama. I'm not sleeping on a 10-2 season, and here's why. Here's why. Right. I think Alabama's defense is going to be very good. We saw what Alabama did against Auburn when you had a situation where the offense, was not playing its best. We saw what happened with Alabama against LSU last year. The Alabama offensive line, I think, is going to be a question mark. I think the Alabama skill players are not going to be as talented as they were last year. And so for me, I'm not saying I'm going to go out and bet the under 10.5. If I had to bet today, I would bet the over. But it will not surprise me if there is an under. Now, the flip side of that, when you talk about what Vegas is looking at, I don't think Nick Saban has lost 2 regular season games in – I don't remember when. It's been a while. Yeah.
Well, it's when Tua got hurt.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
It was
19. So it was
2019.
Yeah.
2019.
So it was LSU when LSU, beat them. And but still that's 1 year out of there's just the odds of Nick Saban of an Alabama team losing 2+ games in the regular season. I think are very, very, very small. And so I'm not a believer in Texas A&M. I'm not, but I look at some of those teams on the schedule, and it won't shock me if Alabama, if that under hits the under 10.5. I'll just say,
well, and Georgia is also 10.5 on DraftKings. Interestingly enough, though, the juice on the over is actually higher for Georgia. So it's minus 205, where it was minus 190. So basically what they're saying is they feel like it's more likely for Georgia to win 11 games against their schedule than Alabama to win 11 games against their schedule. Now, that's not an indication of how they feel those two teams would match up on a neutral field, because it's their schedule versus their schedule. Still interesting to look at. But if you think Georgia's going to lose 2 games this year, and you wanted to go bet under 10.5, plus 165 is a lot of good return on your money. I think
if you think Georgia's going to lose 2 games or more this year, please at John Tweet Sports hit me up on Twitter and tell me which games those are going to be, because I'm genuinely curious for anyone that would think Georgia's going to lose 2+ games. Now, do I think Georgia's going to run the table 12-0? Personally, if you ask me today, I feel good about it, but this schedule is not – I don't think the schedule is as easy as everyone is making it out to be on paper for Georgia, but I do think it's going to be hard for Georgia to lose 2 games in the regular season.
I think that's fair enough. I mean, that seems okay. Just in case you're curious, if you wanted to bet Stetson Bennett for the Heisman Trophy, you could get him at plus 10,000 right now. So $100 bet would win you $10,000.
That's some value right there. That's what we call value.
It's extreme value, actually.
I mean,
is Stetson Bennett going to be a first-round NFL draft pick? No, he is not. But is he? I mean, to give you some perspective on this, Kendall Milton is also plus 10,000.
Yes,
in the Heisman odds, and we love Kendall Milton. He's a fantastic talent, but like he is, we haven't seen a ton of him so far in his Georgia career. He was not a starter last year with Zamir White and James Cook. He will probably be, one of the feature backs this year. But like Stetson Bennett is probably more known commodity, right? I mean, third in the FBS in passing efficiency. I think fourth in passing efficiency, third in QBR, third in yards per attempt, second in yards per completion, and he's playing on a team that's a national title contender. And he has a great story.
And he was the Orange Bowl offensive MVP and the national championship offensive MVP.
Was he the national championship?
He was the actual the offensive MVP of the national championship. Yes. Yeah. And
there's a lot happening that night.
There's not a lot of offense going on, but in the fourth quarter, if you think about that story, right, the storyline leading into for him to be plus 10,000 is really shocking to me. Not because I think he's going to win the Heisman, but I do think, exactly to your point, to be in the same odds as an unknown quantity in a running back for Georgia, when you were the Orange Bowl MVP, the national championship offensive MVP, there are a lot of things.
Joe Burrow was plus 20,000 going into his last year at LSU.
Oh, there you go. That's fair. That's fair.
But I mean, like he didn't have anywhere near the resume that Stetson Bennett did at that point, either with team accomplishments or even his individual statistics were not as good as Bennett's were last year, and he just kind of exploded. I'm not saying Stetson Bennett is going to be 2019 Joe Burrow by any means, but the other guys at plus 10,000, just to give you a quick idea, Haynes King, who might be the quarterback for Texas A&M, we don't know. Talia Tagovailoa for Maryland. Connor Wegman, a true freshman who has never played a down of college football at Texas A&M. Cameron Rising at Utah, who is actually pretty good. We saw him in the Rose Bowl. Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback at Purdue. Blake Corum, the last year's backup running back at Michigan. J.J. McCarthy, we also saw for Michigan. He was the backup quarterback for them last year. Grayson McCall at Coastal Carolina. Casey Thompson, probably the backup quarterback in Texas. It's just it's a lot of guys that have zero shot of winning the Heisman in those range. Stetson Bennett, I don't think has a great shot, but he has a shot.
If Georgia goes 12-0, and you have Eric Gilbert, you have Brock Bowers, you have A.D. Mitchell, you have Kenny McIntosh out of the backfield. Stetson Bennett has the offensive weapons, because we all know that the Heisman Trophy is a quarterback award, but it's won with the skill players on the offense. And so
it's a team award that goes to the quarterback.
Absolutely. That's, for all intents and purposes at this point. And so if Georgia goes 12-0 and Stetson Bennett stays in that same range and starts all 12 games, stays in that same range that he had last year and has more production, in yardage or touchdowns, for example, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the conversation. Now, again, is he going to win it? I would be shocked, but also don't put it past me to put $50 at plus 10,000 on Stetson to win, because that's a pretty good return.
Yeah, it is a good return. No. Okay, a couple early season lines before we get out of here. Georgia, Oregon, September 3rd. Currently, the Dogs are 17-point favorite. So that's come down a little bit from 17.5 at some books. Over under is only 50.5. So what these guys are telling you is they see basically a 34-17 Georgia win. That'd be about 51 points and 17. Yeah. So what do you think of that? Is there anything that you see there that you're like, oh, I see value today, or too many unknowns to play with?
Yeah, I think there's too many unknowns. Not necessarily on the Georgia side, but on the Oregon side. I think it's early for me to be betting those odds, especially, there's not a ton of value there in terms of laying some money down today with the unknowns, on the Oregon side of the ball. But I do think that game, I think don't sleep on the under, right? Like don't sleep on the under.
Say.
The first game, 50.5 is a lot of points for these two teams. With Georgia's defense, going to be good again. Plus with Bo Nix as quarterback for Oregon. But also just this first game in a neutral site is typically a survive and advance type of game, right? So I don't expect Georgia to come out and try to blow the doors off. And so it's going to be the under. I think if folks are looking today, I would say under 50.5 is where I would go.
I would agree with that, but I would wait until make sure some important starter doesn't get injured in fall camp.
We have somebody in the YouTube chat, the Green Soldier, said we're guessing based off of spring, and that's absolutely correct. And I think that's a dangerous thing to do in June when you're talking about lines at plus and minus 17.
So here is one that I might actually take a flyer on right now. And I also think this is a fascinating line. So Clemson and Georgia Tech play September 5th, Labor Day night, the Monday of that weekend, kind of cap off the opening weekend of college football. They play in Atlanta. Clemson is only a 19.5-point favorite in that game. What do we know? We know that Georgia Tech has been really bad under Jeff Collins, but I'm going to share a little inside baseball with you guys, especially if you're still here 51 minutes into the stream. Dabo Swinney hates Jeff Collins. And this all stems back to when Georgia Tech was doing their whole, weight thing before games a couple years ago. A bunch of Georgia Tech players, a bunch of their developmental players came out on the field at Clemson, and they were lifting a bunch of, dumbbells and big bench press bars and stuff.
The weight room on the sideline. Yeah.
Yeah. They kind of damaged Clemson's field. And Dabo is very much a high school football coach type of personality and was like, oh, my field, And
the sacred carpet of Memorial
Howard's
Stadium.
Rock. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Death Valley north. But interestingly enough, and Jeff Collins, when he came in, go back and watch, if you want some really entertaining YouTube, go back and watch his opening press conference, because he just talked a lot of shit about what Georgia Tech was going to be and how they were going to recruit and what they were going to do. And remember that Clemson has buttered their bread in Georgia on the recruiting trail for a long time now. So all of those things have added to, remember that Dabo put his punter in as a quarterback to throw a touchdown pass against Georgia Tech the last time they played in Atlanta. So I think 19.5 points is a pretty small spread, knowing what we know about those two teams right now. I would think there's some value there taking Clemson now, but I also think it's interesting maybe for Clemson's full season outlook that's how small that spread is right now.
Yeah. Well, it's at 8:00 on a Monday night too, right? Isn't that the Monday night game? Yeah. So yeah, I think Clemson, having that Monday night slot pretty close to themselves, especially after last season too. I think all the stuff you mentioned, and then you coming off of a for all intents and purposes disappointing season for Clemson. Dabo might be trying to make a statement.
Yeah. All right. You know what? I think let's circle back. And I think there's a lot of fun stuff we can do with these odds. So we'll spend some more time with these and we'll do a full show looking at some early season lines and playing around with that. But for now, John, thank you for jumping on. This will become a regular thing with you and I, and Josh will be in here sometimes, and and who knows who else, but super excited to do this. And you guys, please go check out dawgcentral.com if you haven't yet. Lots of really great stuff up there already. There's going to be a ton of content on this website as we move forward. A forum and a community that I think is really a mature, intelligent, fun place to go and talk college football. And we will do everything we have to keep it that way. But if you're tired of trolls and kind of just, a lot of the blabber and a lot of the static that comes with Twitter interactions and some of that stuff, come and join us at Dawgs Central. You can subscribe for 6 months for $33.18. John, anything else to say before we go?
Yeah, if you made it this far, 55 minutes in, and you want to try Dawgs Central, shoot me a DM. We'll set you up with 7 days where you can come and join and try it. So hit me a DM. Nice. We'll give you a few days on us, and there you go. Let you check it out. All right.
You can get to John at John Tweets Sports on Twitter. It looks like there's still a little over 30 of you watching right now. So take him up on that. We'd love to see you on there. And there's a really good piece of Arch Manning intel that we did not share in this show from Jason and Dustin at Field Street Forum, our recruiting aces. All right, John, thanks for joining us. Everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been Dawgs Central. We will see you guys soon.